I'm Mike Addick. I appreciate being asked to do the topic. I take doing the topic pretty seriously. I think Paul would agree with this. If you're new, if you're chairing a meeting, what I learned is that you ask somebody ahead of time, not 5 minutes, to do the topic. Care enough about your group, like she did, to ask some days in advance to try to get somebody to do the topic. And if you're asked to do the topic ahead of time, try to investigate the literature and bring the topic out of the literature. What I like to try to do is get a quote from 2 different NA-approved literatures and then tie it together in a common theme. That's what I've got tonight. I've got one quote from the basic text and one from It Works How and Why. I'm going to start off here. It says, "Do we really want to be rid of our resentments, our anger, our fear? Many of us cling to our fears, doubts, self-loathing, and hatred because there is a certain distorted security and familiar pain. It seems safer to embrace what we know than to let go of it for fear of the unknown." And that's in a basic text. I've got page 33, but it might be in an earlier edition. I know the pages changed. And what they're asking me to do is step out into the unknown and operate on a different skill set and a different set of coping mechanisms. But that's not what the topic is about. I'm going to read this quote from It Works How and Why, and it'll become clear what the topic's going to be. It talks about, we may wonder what will happen to us if we place ourselves under God's care. We may fear that we won't be happy with what our lives will be like after working this step. And it's talking about step 3. Because I've seen a lot of newcomers, and myself, I didn't want to move on until I thought I understood everything. And I'm hoping that this topic can simplify, I think, a step that is very complicated or complicated by many people. But it's not that scary and it's not that complicated. It says, when we trust that there is growth in taking action despite our fear of uncertainty, which ties into the first quote from the basic text, we are able to work step 3. Even though we do not know how our lives will change as we work this step, we can learn to trust that our higher power will care for us better than we could. The third step is our commitment to our own emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And that comes from It Works How and Why, page 19. And how I want to tie those two together is because when I think about taking step 3 and I'm turning my will and my life over to the higher power, I don't know how it's going to turn out. And I know what I'm familiar with, even though I admit when I get here that I'm in the middle of a shitstorm. It's still, paradoxically, very hard to let go of those same coping mechanisms that I will say got me here in the first place. But what this talks about is he understands. I know Jimmy K wrote the basic text. I'm sure it was a conglomeration of folks that wrote It Works How and Why later, much later, I might add. But what they're saying is they understand that I'm scared to let go. But the reason that I wanted to do this topic is because I wanted to simplify it and make it clear that isn't it true that without even knowing it, anybody that comes to Narcotics Anonymous and plans to stick is without realizing it made a beginning on step 3. You know, I remember I was willing to come in and turn my will and my life over to the care and protection and guidance of Narcotics Anonymous in regards to my addiction problem, as opposed to the things that I was operating on. When I walked in the door, I was turning it over. So, if this is not turning my will and my life over to a newfound providence, then what is? So basically the reason that I thought about this topic is because whether I know it or not, whether I feel it or not, whether I know what the outcome's going to be or not, if I'm coming and I start the NA program, I am turning it over. I decided to really turn it over when I came in here. I didn't even know it though. But what these texts talk about is just by coming in here, I made a beginning on it. And by doing these principles that these steps are founded on, I am doing different than what I used to do. And if I'm doing these steps, I am turning it over to that higher power. Because I'm saying this is a set of principles, spiritual in nature, that if practiced as a way of life, will expel the obsession to use. And my predecessors tell me will enable me to become happily and usefully whole. And I believe that. Because when I got here, I knew that I was not whole. And I knew that everything I touched turned to shit. But as time has gone on, I've realized that even though I had fear about this unknown, like it talked about in the first quote, even though I had fear about how it would turn out, turning it over to HP, I'm here to report that I now have a past in recovery that proves I'm not a failure, that proves I'm a success. As long as I maintain a certain simple attitude and follow these few simple rules they call the 12 steps that they put in front of me. And to me, they're a little more than suggestions. If you jump out of an airplane, it's a little bit more than suggested that you pull the ripcord. And for me, I have found that this way of life is immensely more beneficial and productive, even though in the beginning it was scary to jump out on faith into this unknown and jump out believing that somebody else believed that what my HP had in store for me was better than I could do for myself. That's a scary step. I understand that. But I'm here to report to a newcomer, if you come in and do the steps, whether you understand them or not, or why you're doing them or not, that you are turning. And it will work out better. That's been my experience and everybody that wrote all these texts. And I believe it. And that's why I wanted to do this topic. And I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, and I'll pass.
Thanks, Mike. Jack.